So tonight's episode is going to be a little bit different. I haven't scripted anything out. I'm just going to sit here and talk. There's been a lot of changes since the last time I put an episode out. Right now I am sitting in a 20-foot school bus that has been converted into a tiny house on wheels, basically. The situation with the house that I was living in went bad, and basically it was a house that was in my family for several generations, probably about 80 years. And the situation went bad. Had some extended family that decided to sue my parents for the house. And rather than just waste all of our resources and continue to fight them over it, we finally ended the lawsuit after a couple of years. And that basically meant that I was homeless. And rather than try to find some dingy cat piss smelling apartment someplace for what I couldn't afford anyway, I decided to put my money where my mouth was and try this whole experiment with living on the road. It's been kind of a crazy, wild trip. Over the last month, we've basically moved all of my stuff into storage, and I've picked up this school bus, and the people that I bought it from were really cool, really nice. The girl that was living here, she lived in it for about a year, I think, and drove it around the Southwest and the desert, kind of the same places that I want to visit. And like I said, it's like a tiny home on wheels. And I looked at Sprinter vans, I looked at ProMasters and Transits, and this was a lot more with what I wanted to do as far as living and working. So right now I've got my podcast set up, I've got my microphone, I've got my computer, and I've got a fridge, a sink, wheels, a bed, my dog. I don't know if you can hear her or not, but she's on the bed snoring right now. And it's going to be a crazy experience. I haven't done anything like this before, even though when I was a kid, I used to think about how cool it would be to live on the waves and just tour from island to island in the Caribbean or sail around the world or whatever. And I'm not a sailor. I live in a landlocked state, though I do love the ocean. But this is kind of going to be like the same thing, really, if you think about it, except I'm going to be on land. And my plan is that I'm going to travel from place to place. I'm going to work online. That's my primary source of income, is I have some clients that I work for, and I write creative content for them. And I'm going to go from place to place, and I'm going to follow the seasons, and hopefully never have to endure another North Park winter ever again, which last year was awful, just about killed me. And I don't have to worry about the wind blowing through the old house or the roof falling in or leaks or anything like that. This is going to be a whole different experiment. And along the way, I hope to meet interesting people and hopefully interview them, even put them on the podcast, see places that I've always wanted to see, and just kind of take life as it comes. And hopefully get my bills paid off, because I tell you what, the big selling factor of this whole experiment was I can get a crappy apartment for, I don't know, I think in Colorado right now, you're looking at about $1,800 a month for the lowest. And car payments on this vehicle are a fraction of that. So that's kind of what moved my opinion in that direction, and thinking, well, it's either that or live in a tent, or, I don't know, bum around with friends, live in somebody's basement and just basically feel miserable and like I haven't done anything with my life. And you know what? I'm going to be 48 years old in just about 6 days. Last year I was in Ireland on my 47th birthday. And it's crazy to think how those changes have just come around that quickly. a year, and everything is like completely different. I'm living in a school bus right now, and this is my third night in the school bus, and I still haven't come up with a name for the bus yet. It's kind of a I've got a couple of names that I've narrowed it down to. One of them is the struggle bus. So shout out to my friend Tiffany, who always asks if I'm on the struggle bus. And it's like, well, now I could literally be on the struggle bus. My parents want to call it the magic bus because, they grew up in the 60s. And I've had people say you should name it Flight Risk because if you're a familiar listener or reader of my blog, you'll know that I have a lot of problems sometimes with my ex-wife creating drama. And one of the things that I was contacted about was from child support. And they wanted to know if, what was going on with this whole thing because she stalks my blog and reads about my projects and things. And basically they wanted to find out if I was a flight risk for not paying child support. And it's like, oh yeah, that's what I'm going to do because I live a very public life with my blog and I publish everything that I'm doing. And I'm also building a YouTube channel about all this stuff too. I'm hoping to just kind of give people awareness and tell stories and kind of live out loud on the road. But yeah, they wanted to know if I was a flight risk. So Flight Risk was one of the names that I had narrowed down for the bus. I don't know. Maybe the bus will name itself at some point. A couple of the things that I wanted to talk about in this episode too is just getting everything ready. The last several weeks I've just been beating the hell out of myself with moving house. And I've basically taken 10 years worth of stuff and beginning of August, maybe it was the end of July, I had a yard sale, and pretty much anything that wasn't nailed down was fair game for the yard sale. And I did pretty well with the yard sale. There were a lot of things that I didn't want to see go, but they wound up helping me afford to get into this bus. So that was one thing. And since then, we've been moving and cleaning and fixing things and getting ready for the big move out of the house. And the house has had 6 generations of my family living in it. And in a way, it's kind of sad to see it go because there's a lot of family history involved with that. My family moved in 1947. My great-grandpa started a trucking company from that building. And his dad lived there briefly until he moved back to Santa Fe, and then he passed away shortly after that, I think in 1953 or 54. My dad and his brother and sisters lived there, and then, I spent a lot of time there. My grandparents were still living in the house for a while. And then my son came to live with me until all that BS went south with the custody battle. So there's a lot of things that have been in that house that have been good, a lot of potential, but also a lot of pain. And in a way, it's kind of good to step away from that. There's a lot of things in my life that I can't change right now, and I'm not really happy with that. But I do think that this project has the potential to start a new life and give me a life worth living with meaning. A little while back, I read the book by Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning. And he basically said that you can survive just about anything as long as you have a reason to live. And I think going and touring the country and going from place to place and visiting friends and seeing landmarks and all this other stuff is going to give me a chance to fill my buckets again and really give me some kind of meaning that I've been missing out on. For the last 10 years, since, my marriage came apart at the seams, and I decided a life of contentment and peace without conflict and fighting was a lot better than perpetuating all that drama. The last 10 years has been kind of rough. It's been an uphill fight. Anybody that's gone through a divorce, especially a high conflict divorce, is going to tell you that it's not easy. And a lot of people don't recover. And a lot of people, become desperate and they dive into something familiar, which is awful because that familiarity is not a place that you should be. And there's a saying out there that says, you can't heal from something if you're in the environment that continues to hurt you. And I think that's true with a lot of things, especially divorce, especially when you've been in an abusive situation. And it's just been it's been a struggle. It's been the struggle bus. And I hope to change that about my life too. I'm hoping to just kind of start life anew, reboot everything, find meaning. And so it's going to be my dog and me, just traveling from place to place, meeting new people, getting into adventures. I hope to podcast more often. I'm going to blog more often. I have affiliate links set up on my site, so if you want to buy anything, I get a little bit of the percentage of the cut, and it doesn't affect the price of what you've bought at all. So that's kind of how I'm going to work some things too, on top of the clients that I'm writing for full time. But it's going to be an adventure, and I think at 48 years old, I might as well start this adventure. Something I've wanted to do for a very, very long time. Everybody always says, hey, I wish I could do X when I retire. And it's usually like, I want to travel and I want to see things and I want to go from place to place in an RV or whatever. And I actually have the opportunity to do that right now and work and live. And I think it's going to be a great opportunity to figure out who I am and what I want, what makes me tick, what makes me happy. It's almost going to be like a pilgrimage, if you want to get all woo-woo on the whole thing. My dog is really snoring. I don't know if you can hear that, but it's hilarious. So, I don't know. I kind of just want to chase the seasons, see cool stuff, and not have the wind hurt my face when I go outside to let the dog pee. I don't know. It's kind of a weird thing. Oh, that's what I wanted to talk about. So we got the house moved out, got everything put into storage, and I'm talking about weeks of carrying furniture and lifting things and packing things away, building a shed, building this and that, searching for a bus or any kind of vehicle. And like I said, I looked at the vans, and I really wasn't impressed with the vans because the worst part, I think, was they didn't have any light. You can get into a $120,000 conversion van, and when you open it and you just have this sense of dread overcome you because you're just walking into a cave on wheels, that's not a good situation. So I was looking at schoolies, which are converted school buses, and this is a short bus. So it's not much bigger than, I would say, a GMC Suburban or something like that. So it's maneuverable. You can drive it like a regular vehicle. The gas mileage isn't that great, but it does have a lot of the conveniences that, you need to live. But it's also got a lot of light, and it's got a lot of space, a room to live, room for my dog and me, plenty of windows, and I can go from place to place. And it's not going to break the bank when it comes to making car payments. That whole process was really frustrating because when you're trying to find a loan for a vehicle, the banks don't want to lend anything that's 10 years old or older. They want everything to be within 10 years. And so that leaves basically anything over $70,000 or more. And so that means that the car payments are going to be pretty bad. And you could get a personal loan but nobody was lending anything over $20,000 for personal loan. And that was even hard to negotiate and try to get approval for. So if you buy something that's converted by hand too, they might not consider that a proper vehicle unless it's been titled as an RV. And luckily my bus is titled as an RV. But it was a whole process, and it was like, how are people supposed to even get into this? I guess they're just supposed to have the cash lying around or go to a dealership and spend, nearly six figures on a house on wheels. So, I don't know, it was just kind of a frustrating process. It was exhausting. A lot of driving to Denver, Fort Collins, Laramie, Cheyenne, just any place to see if I could find a vehicle that would work for me. And I found one. It was in Denver, actually. But the bummer is that somebody else was looking at it, and the girl that was selling it, I don't know, this is going to sound like such a boomer thing, but the Gen X in me still believes that if you tell somebody you're going to do something, you ought to do it. So she said, well, she didn't want to deal with these other people looking at it because they wanted to see it at night, they wanted to see it at day. And so she says, yeah, I'll take your offer. And I was like, great. Let me get financing sorted out and I'll contact you. So this was on the weekend. So I didn't contact her. I was waiting for Monday to roll along. I get a text at 8 o'clock in the morning on Monday, and she said that she sold it to the other people and sorry. I was just like, oh man, how do people not understand that when you tell somebody, yeah, this is a done deal, vehicle's yours, your word is kind of your bond, and then they can just kind of shit backwards on you. Let's use vulgarity on that one. But I was just like, I just don't want to deal with it. And it needed some work. It was a cute bus and everything, but it had the bed. It was up by the front window, and it had this sink that was taken out of a farmhouse that probably weighed 200 or 300 pounds. And it all looked cool. It had a shower and it had a lot of cool kind of stuff. But I was like, I just, maybe it wasn't right for me. Maybe that was a sign that things just weren't right for it. So a couple days later, I find another listing, and it's in a town closer by. It's in Fort Collins. It's got just about everything that I want on it. And so they're really cool. They worked with me on this, and I was able to finally get it with the help of my local bank. So that was great too. So I got into the bus, and some of the things that I've had to do is I did some of my own modifications. There was a bench with kind of a metal table, like a hospital table that they would put over a bed, like when you're in the hospital and they bring you your juice and your Jell-O and, the cold meat plate and whatever that they bring you when you're recovering. But this was a metal table like that, and it extended and it rose and everything, but it just didn't work for what I wanted to do. Well, one of the items that I had left over from the yard sale, the mother of all yard sales, was a writing desk. And the funny thing about this writing desk is it's identical to a writing desk that I had when I was married. And, it was just beautiful. I wanted to write on it, and it just wound up getting stuffed down in storage. Well, when I got divorced, I did not get the desk back. Even though it had a broken leg, I never saw the desk again, didn't get it back. So a friend of mine, his ex-girlfriend, who worked at the same place that I did, the same university, she was getting rid of an identical desk. And so I got the desk from her, and it even had the same leg that was broken on it, and I fixed it. But I just didn't have room for it to put anywhere, and I figured, well, I got it for a decent price, so maybe I can unload it at the yard sale. And everybody commented about how beautiful the desk was, but nobody wanted to buy it. So I just figured, well, I'll put it in storage or I'll donate it. Well, I got to thinking, it's like, for what I need to do with my writing and the podcast and just living in general, that metal hospital table just wasn't going to work for me. So what I did was I measured everything. I went out one night. I was kind of obsessed, and I measured everything, and I was just like, I'll be damned. The desk actually fits the footprint of the bench and the little cubbies and then the metal tray table that was in here. Like, it was even a little bit shorter, and it was a lot lighter. So the next day I pulled everything out, put the desk in, screwed it into the wall, and now I've got my old writing desk that I can just work at. Now the drawback to that is I took out bench seating that passengers could have sat at, or visitors or whatever, but now I've got a place to work. And that was kind of a cool thing. So I also raised the bed about 6 inches so I could put in more storage. I installed a metal locker that has a wardrobe so I can hang my clothes, and I can put other clothes and pots and pans and all sorts of other stuff that I need to live. And just slowly but surely making the bus my own. So it's kind of had a little bit of a makeover and a facelift from the previous owners and what they did with it. But I think it's starting to come together. I've got an old leather trunk in here that, was my grandmother's. It's where I can stow my sweaters and blankets and everything else. So that's the one thing that I wanted to talk about tonight too, is stowing things away. It is pretty crazy with having everything in the bus. When you drive your car down the road, you really don't think about things like, every bump that you hit is going to throw things around. In a bus, it's a very real thing. So if you don't have everything nailed down or stowed away or packed away somehow and secured, these lovely Colorado roads that we have to drive on, they let you know every moment as you're driving a vehicle like this that it could be the last moment that you see something, because it's going to wind up on the floor and broken into pieces. So I've had to be really mindful about where things go and how they're tied down and how they're put away. And it's been kind of a process, and I've broken so many things. I had potted plants come flying off of the countertops. I had, some things that just won't stay, like the dish drying rack and all this other stuff. They just wind up on the floor. So eventually, I drive little day trips or, go places and see things, and I just try out the bus. And I notice every time I go out, something breaks or something falls down, and I have to put it back up or figure out a way to secure it better. And the other day I had a big setback, and I actually wrote about it on my blog. So if you want to check out my blog at 60milesfromanywhere.com, you can read all about that. I was at my campsite, and it was the second night that I was there, and I believe tonight is the third night. I think that's what I said earlier. I'm losing track. It's just been a blur trying to move house and get the bus set up and everything else. But the morning after the second night that I was out, I was driving down the road, and we've had a lot of rain lately, and the bus hit these washboards. If you're not familiar with washboards, they're what happens when it rains on a dirt road, and it creates these little ridges, and it will just rattle the heck out of any vehicle. I mean, a regular car versus a bus, there's still going to be stuff falling down and getting knocked all over the place. So I'm driving down these washboards, and the wind gusts out, and it was just enough to basically cause the latch on the door to fail. And I'm driving down the road, and the door just swings open. It's got like a house door on the side, in place where an accordion door for a school bus would be. The door just flies wide open and whacks the side of the bus. Then it rips the hydraulic arm off of the door. And so I'm like, oh no, I must have forgotten to latch it. So I latched it, I put it back in place, and I was like, all right, when I get to my folks' house, I'll fix the hydraulic arm. Everything will be hunky-dory or whatever. So I drive down the road a little bit further, and then I hit some potholes and everything in this paved section of road, and the door goes flying open again, and it's like, I know I latched that thing, and it was latched right, but I didn't latch it from the outside too, so just the inside latch, it was enough to just knock it loose, and that door went flying, whacked the side of the bus, and bent the door, and actually broke a little bit of the wood on the door. And I was just like, oh no, I don't have the money to replace a house door. So with the help of my dad, I limped the bus in, and my dad and I glued the door and put on some metal brackets and got it all fixed and set up again, and it was back in business. But I tell you, that's one of the setbacks to this whole thing is it's a learning process. You get to see what works, what doesn't, what needs to be improved, what you have to keep working at, because it's a whole different way to live. And you've got your vehicle and you've got, your house. Basically, it's all in one. And so you have to make sure that everything's right. It's a whole different mindset from what I'm used to, because as I was living in that old house and I wasn't able to do repairs or anything because the lawsuit was going on, it became so oppressive and everything just kind of degraded after a while. I mean, there was a lot of stress. I was going through a depressive episode with all this stuff too. And it was like there would be days, it was like a week would go by and I realized I hadn't done dishes in a week, or I hadn't folded laundry in almost 2 weeks. And, the house became kind of a landscape of my mental health, and it wasn't great. And the house itself, because we couldn't do any work on it because of the lawsuit, it was beginning to just degrade. Things were falling apart. The ceiling was starting to drip. Yeah, there was a permeating smell of mildew. And a lot of the projects that I started were half done because basically when the extended family started suing my folks for the house, the lawyer said, all right, all work on the house has to stop. So I stopped doing all the repairs and all the carpentry and everything that I was doing on the house. And it just came to a standstill. Well, old houses, this house was over 100 years old. My family had had it for 80 years. But these old houses, if you don't do work on them and maintenance, they really start to just kind of slide. And this place was getting really bad. And other than my office, a lot of the different rooms had a lot of problems. And it just became a lot. But I think what this whole schoolie project is going to do is it's going to kind of force me to be a little bit more mindful. One of the problems that I've had lately has been my attention span has just been shot. I find myself doom scrolling on TikTok and Instagram, Facebook, and I'm just not doing anything productive. If I have internet connectivity, I just surf the internet. I just look up random stuff. The big reason tonight that I'm actually doing this podcast is because I'm out in the middle of nowhere. I don't have a good internet signal, so I'm kind of forced to do other things. I'm forced to be more mindful with my resources. As far as my time goes, I can't be on the internet. I get a very weak signal. I'm not getting texts from people a lot. I'm not having a lot of distractions either. But some of the other things that I have to work on has been things like I don't have hot and cold running water in this bus. I have one water source, and it has cold water. And to do dishes or anything like that, I need to use my tea kettle to heat up water. And so everything is a very careful process, and I'm forced to focus on everything that I do and how I use my time and how I use my resources. And I can't afford to let things get cluttered in this place like I did in the house. And I just can't let things slide, and I can't just doom scroll and watch TV or whatever that I was doing to occupy my time. I have to work. I have to focus on things that I'm doing. I have to make things a priority and be very conscious of all my actions, even down to how far I need to drive to do something because gasoline is so expensive right now. So in a weird way, my life has become much more regimented. It's become, like I said, mindful. So I even have to be aware of how much electricity that I'm using. Right now, everything that I'm doing on my computer and for this recording is done off of battery power on my computer. I do have solar panels on my bus, but you don't get a constant supply of energy without the sun being out. And right now it's 10:20 at night. And if I was to microwave some popcorn like I did last night, it might drain my batteries enough from the microwave that my inverter is going to be screaming at me saying that my voltage is too low and it needs to shut off. So I have to do a lot of my cooking, a lot of my other things that require electricity in the bus. They all have to be done during daylight hours or when I know I've got a constant supply of energy. And I'm still trying to figure out the learning curve on why my alternator isn't charging the batteries at the same time when I'm driving as the solar is. So there's a whole thing with that. And it's just good that I have this kind of time to stage this whole expedition. Because if I just jumped into a bus or a van or whatever and just headed out, I think I would just run into way too many problems. It would be just detrimental. It would be a deterrent to actually enjoy my life. And there's things that I do. I haven't had coffee in this bus yet because it's just kind of a pain in the ass to grind coffee beans and, heat up the percolator and everything else like that. So what I've been doing is just making hot tea. And I've been living, my morning ritual used to be I would grind up some fresh coffee beans and I would stick them in the Keurig and, make a cup of coffee and maybe a second cup of coffee. But now I've been making tea because it's easier and I've got the resources. And honestly, I haven't missed coffee all that much. So I've been kind of doing well on black tea and a little bit of milk and a little bit of sugar. And, you've got caffeine to get you going in the morning. I tend to not snack as much because you have to be aware of your resources and, what you keep in your fridge. The whole process has just been regimented. I was going to say crazy, but it's almost the opposite of it. It's so regimented where you have to be aware of everything that you do. You have to be meticulous. And just the way that I've been living for the last couple of years and trying to get the house in order and dealing with the chaos of family law court and dealing with the chaos of extended family suing and doing dirty tricks and everything. Gosh, it's weird that it's regimented and I have to be so aware of what I do. But at the same time, it feels a little bit more freeing. It's hard to explain. It's hard to articulate what I mean by all that. But the whole thing is just, it's a different way to look at things. It's a different way to live. And I haven't even really started off on my big expedition yet. So I don't even know the first location that I want to visit. I'm just kind of out here in the boonies on BLM property, and I can stay out here for a few days and then I have to move. And, I want to do things and experience really cool things, but I also have to be aware of my resources like money and wear and tear that I'll put on my house because it's not just a vehicle, it's a house. But I think about this big world out there and all the cool things that I can see and do. And it's very daunting because where do you even begin? It's like you have an entire ocean in front of you. Where do you want to go first? And all you see is this flat, grayish blue ocean and clouds and a horizon. And you're just like, I'm going to fall off the edge of the world. And that's kind of how it feels right now. But I'm doing this, and it's been a while since I've done this. And I used to be just so concerned about everything that I did and how I would say things, or, what if I made noise? I'm making a lot of noise now, and if you're listening to this, you're just hearing this as raw audio. Like, I'm just talking. It's just an idiot sitting in his school bus talking with his dog snoring in the background. And maybe I'm too harsh on myself. I'm not an idiot. But boy, lately, I'm scared. I'll be honest. And my motto has been, for the last few years, do something every day that scares you. A year ago, I was in Ireland, and I was driving a stick shift on the left side of the road in these winding little roads along the Wild Atlantic Way. And every day I did something new, and every day was something really spooky and scary, pushing my comfort zones. And I think it's important that we push our comfort zones. Otherwise, we're like my crazy ass aunt who sued my folks for the house, and she thinks that she won. And, at the end of the day, I guess she did. But what it was my parents just didn't want to dedicate any more heartache or money or resources into this lawsuit. They could have gone to a trial and just cleaned house on the whole thing and been done with my aunt forever and ever. But the problem is that it was probably going to take another $30,000 just to do that, just to go to trial. And that place is falling down. The $30,000 that could have gone into a trial should have gone into things like putting a new roof on the damn place. But instead, as always, the lawyers benefited. Nobody else did, just the lawyers. And I just wish people would think that. Everybody just thinks, mine, mine, mine. I'll take you to court. I'll sue you. They don't understand that when you go to court, the only people that win in that whole situation are blood-sucking attorneys. That's it. And they don't care what happens with your life. They don't care that some guy that was living in a house and trying to get his life back in order is going to wind up out on the street. And I was lucky enough to have the help and connections and resources to get into this place. And this would scare the hell out of most people. And maybe that's what I need, is I need something every day that scares me. But not in a bad way. Not in a way that it's like, I wonder what kind of conflict I'm going to have with my aunt who lives next door and is trying to take this house. Or watching my dad stress out to the point where, he's just not having a good time. And my mom who's just trying to hold the whole family together and trying to make everybody happy. It was hellish for the last 2 years. And I'm glad to have it put behind me. I'm just glad to have something ahead of me that it gets to be mine. This journey, if you will, if you want to go the woo-woo thing or whatever, this is going to be my journey and my expedition into the world and seeing what I value and what makes me tick. And maybe I won't like it. Maybe I won't want to do this after a year. But you never know until you try. And this is something that I've always wanted to do. And I'll be 48 years old in a couple of days. And after moving all that stuff out of the house, I realized that I am not as young as I used to be. My body aches. I finally went to a hot springs last night to kind of just decompress and let my body just stop hurting from moving things and lifting and carrying and fixing and building things. And so I went to this hot spring. I sat around in it for about an hour and a half. And then I drove the hour back home. Well, anywhere that I go is pretty much home now, but I drove all the way back to my camping spot out on the BLM, and I slept. And finally the dog and I have come to an agreement on sleeping arrangements. And so I was actually able to sleep. But I feel more at peace now, not having to deal with that house situation, not having to deal with the conflict from that, the conflict from everything for the last 2.5 years. Just feeling hopeless and run over and dragged and, trying to make everybody happy. I know I'm saying a lot. Oh well. But it feels good. It feels like freedom. And I know that there's going to be a lot of things that are attached to it. I've got another car payment to make now, basically, but my rent is a third of what it would be, just from paying for the bus as it is for living in a really crappy apartment or having to find roommates or basically being a leech on friends and living in their basement for, a lot longer than they would probably feel comfortable with. And I get to see things and I get to exist. And it sounds kind of hokey, I'm sure, but I don't think I've got a lot of time left on this planet. And I'm not saying that I've got some terminal illness, but you never know what day is going to be your last. And people that hold off and they say, well, when I retire, I'm going to write a book, or when I retire, I'm going to travel, and when I retire, I'm going to see the world or go to Europe or whatever. What if that time never comes? What if you can't retire, and if you do, you're living hand to mouth? Or what if you're just too tired and beat to hell from life that you don't even want to enjoy things when you do get out? That's kind of where I'm at, is I don't expect to be able to retire. And as a writer, honestly, I like what I do so much. I just love to write. I love to think creatively. I like to express myself in words, and I like to do this media stuff too. I mean, this is actually a lot of fun for me. But I don't see any real point in... How do I explain this? I see a lot of people, they go through life, they work 5 days a week. The end of the week, they get a paycheck, they go out and they buy enough beer or wine or whiskey or whatever to get themselves completely numb all weekend to relax enough just to start all over again on Monday. And when I'm not moving a house or putting things in storage or building sheds or working on a new bus, I find myself hating the idea of that, where you just toil all week and then you numb yourself over the weekend. I work every single day. I write, I promote my writing, I look for new clients, I look for new contacts, I write content for people, I write my own books, my own stories, I blog, I do podcasts occasionally, and now I'm getting more into it. It never stops. And then on top of that is life, like you have to keep your house in order. You have to do things for self-care, like go see things or experience life. And I've done the whole thing where it's an 8 to 5 job and you work 5 days a week. And when the weekend comes, you're emotionally and physically and spiritually fried. And I've done that, and I don't want to ever do that again. I don't want to. I might have to at some point. But right now, I'm enjoying writing. I'm enjoying living life on my own terms, being my own boss. I know that on days that I don't work are days that I'm not going to get paid. And that's my problem. And it has very little to do with some boss making my life hell, walking into an office and getting chewed out for something I didn't do or wasn't good enough at, or whatever. Maybe they had a bad day and they decided to take it out on me. When you work for yourself, you don't have to worry about that kind of crap. You just show up, you do the work, you try to be better each day than you were the last, and you just try to just keep going and just forging ahead. And there's a saying out there that says, let's see if I can remember it. If you want something you've never had, you're going to have to do something you've never done. I mean, maybe I'm paraphrasing that, but to me, this is something I've never done. And maybe it's leading me towards a life that I wish I had. Something that I've always wanted, something that I've written about and fantasized about. But now I get to actually reach out and grab it. And it's like taking a wild horse by the mane and just letting it drag you. And maybe that's what I need. And maybe a lot of other people would be interested in my shenanigans and exploits and adventures and everything else with my dog and me. Going across the country, seeing stuff that I'd read about in books or watched on TV or saw people on YouTube talk about and never had the chance to really do, because someday when I might make enough money to actually go do these things, then maybe I can. But the odds of that happening are pretty low. And most people go through their 8-to-5 job, and when they retire, they realize they don't have enough money to do anything that they always dreamed about doing. Or they're tired, or they just don't care anymore. And I think right now I'm at the sweet spot in my life where I can do the things that I want to do. And I'm ready. I have been more than ready to finally live my life. And I finally can. And I hope to talk more about that kind of stuff. So tonight I'm going to sign off and say thank you for listening. If you want to go check out my affiliate links, they're on my website, www.60milesfromanywhere.com. And unlike my previous posts and these podcast episodes, the 60 Miles from Anywhere is going to be more metaphorical, because I am going to be moving and going from place to place. And hopefully I won't have to be in places where I have to drive an hour just to buy milk. So, stay safe, take care, and keep listening. Thank you.